The chain around Evangeline Wildfire's wrists was polished bright enough to mirror the moon, and that was the cruelest part of it. How pretty betrayal could look. She stood at the center of the treaty hall with a veil over her face, silver links biting her skin, while both packs watched from carved stone tiers like they had gathered for theater instead of surrender. Snowmelt dripped from cloaks, torches hissed in iron brackets. The sacred fire in the pit ahead of her burned gold, waiting. Her uncle, Regent Drake Stormborn, kept one hand on the back of her neck, fingers heavy as a shackle. "Straighten," he murmured against her ear, his voice warm for the crowd. "You are Wildfire's gift tonight. Try not to tremble." She did anyway. Not because of the cold, because she could still smell smoke from the border villages he had failed to defend, hear children coughing in winter tents, see the hunger in her people's eyes when he announced the treaty. One bride of ruling blood in exchange for ceasefire grain roots. Living tribute, he had called it in private, as if he were negotiating over horses. She had begged him in his chambers 3 nights ago on her knees, palms pressed to the floorboards. "Please send me as envoy, not as bride. Let me negotiate terms." He had tipped her chin up with 2 fingers and smiled like a patient tutor. "You negotiate nothing. You are terms." Now priests ringed her in white fur mantles, chanting old moon vows while the storm-born crown twin waited at the opposite side of the fire. She could not see his face clearly through the veil, only broad shoulders, dark hair bound at the nape, a ceremonial torque at his throat. This was supposed to be the gentler twin, the one known for treaties and soft voice and careful hands. She had clung to that rumor on the march north, the way a drowning wolf clings to driftwood. Drake leaned close again, all teeth behind his smile. "Do your duty, niece. Your mother died failing hers." The blow landed where he intended. Evangeline swallowed hard and stepped when the priests commanded. "By ash and blood," intoned the high priestess. "Who offers?" "Wildfire offers," Drake said. "Who receives?" A Stormborn elder struck his staff to stone. "Stormborn receives." The twin across from her extended his palm. The ritual blade was set into her bound hands. Silver made her fingers numb, but she cut anyway, the line across her palm sharp and bright. Her blood hit the fire pit stones in 4 fat drops. Gold flames surged. Then black shot through it like ink dropped in water. Gasps broke across the hall. The chanting faltered. The priestess's eyes widened. "Hold!" The twin in front of her jerked like he'd been struck. The marriage mark should have bloomed on his inner wrist, curling inward toward the heart. Instead, heat flared around Evangeline's left forearm, a vicious brand spiraling in the opposite direction, outward, toward war. She screamed before she could stop herself. Across the fire, not one man cried out but 2. The first was the ceremonial groom, reeling back, skin untouched. The second voice came from the soldier's tier, a raw, furious sound that snapped every head to the shadows. A man in plain black leathers stood there, no crown, no torque, only a commander's scars and eyes like winter steel. He stared at Evangeline with naked hatred and something far worse, recognition. "Impossible," whispered someone. "Kale," hissed another. The name moved through the room like a knife. Kale Stormborn, the other twin. The war king who fought at the front and vanished among his own ranks. The one mothers used to frighten unruly pups into obedience. The one who had buried 3 wildfire raiding parties with his own hands. Evangeline's mark burned hotter, as if hearing him named. "No," Kyle said, voice carrying over stone. "Not fear. Rage. Undo it." The priestess looked stricken. "The moon has chosen." Drake's grip crushed her shoulder. For the first time all night his mask slipped. Panic flashed across his face, quick and venomous. He leaned in, smile fixed for the crowd, nails digging through her sleeve. "You stupid little thing," he breathed. "What did you do?" "I didn't—" Silence. Stormborn elders were already shouting, some for annulment, some for immediate sealing, some for blood quarantine. The ceremonial twin stood pale and rigid, jaw locked in humiliation. Kale took one step down from the tier and guards moved instinctively, not to stop him, Evangeline realized, but to make room. Drake hauled her back by her chains before Kale could reach the floor. "Wildfire withdraws the bride until omens are interpreted," he announced, voice booming now, political calm restored. "For the safety of both packs." "That is not your decision," a Stormborn general barked. "It is while she carries my regency seal." He dragged her through a side archway before anyone could settle whose law ruled the moment. The last thing she saw before the doors slammed was Kale's face in the torchlight. Hard, furious, and fixed on her like she was the enemy he had always promised to kill. They locked her in a narrow guest chamber off the western cloister, still inside the border fortress, with one window slit and 2 guards at the door. Both men Drake had brought from Wildfire, not Stormborn sentries. That frightened her more than the chain. Silver cuffs remained on her wrists. An iron collar, buckled on her before the march, for your own safety, lay cold around her throat, too snug to get fingers under. Each breath scraped. Below, the hall rumbled with argument long into the night. Twice she heard Kale's name. Once she heard her own, followed by Curse Bride and War Price. No one came for her. Near midnight, Drake did. He entered alone with a decanter and 2 rolled parchments tucked under his arm. His boots left wet half-moons on the stone. Snow had started again outside. He closed the door gently behind him and set the decanter on the table. "Drink," he said. She didn't move. He sighed, as if disappointed in a stubborn child. "Evangeline, listen carefully. There has been a procedural complication. We will correct it before dawn." Her eyes dropped to the parchments. Red wax waited unbroken at the corners. "What are those?" "Addendums to the treaty, routine clarifications." He unrolled one and flattened it with his palm. "Territorial stewardship transfers. Emergency military authority. A temporary clause authorizing detention of the war twin pending investigation of coercive bond claims." Her heartbeat stumbled. "That says execution. Technically conditional. You can't—" "I can do anything if it wears your blood signature." He produced the ritual blade, cleaned now, and held it up between them. Moonlight flashed along its edge. Thumbprint at the bottom. "We leave at first light." She stared at him. The room felt very small, the collar very tight. "You started the border raids," she whispered. Pieces clicking into place made her nauseous. "You wanted this." Drake tilted his head, amused she had finally caught up. "I wanted stability." Wildfire was weak. Stormborn was divided. Conflict creates need. Need creates authority. "And I create legitimacy." "Exactly." When she didn't reach for the blade, his expression thinned. "Do not mistake sentiment for leverage, niece. You were spared because your bloodline is useful. Refuse me, and I'll have your body carried from this room before sunrise and tell them the failed bond drove you mad." He stepped close enough that she could smell cloves on his breath. "Sign." Evangeline looked past his shoulder to the crack under the door where torchlight flickered. She forced her voice steady. "May I have water first?" A pause, then a satisfied smile. "There, better." He turned to pour from the decanter. She moved. She drove her shoulder into his spine with everything she had. He crashed into the table, parchment sliding, wine exploding red across stone. Before he could rise, she grabbed the fallen decanter and smashed it against the bedframe, glass spraying. A shard sliced her palm open. Pain flared hot. Drake roared, half wolf in the sound. He caught her chain and yanked. Silver tore skin at her wrists. She spun, slammed the broken neck of the decanter into his forearm. He cursed, released her, and she ran for the door. One guard got it open at Drake's shout. She hit him low, hard, blood-slick hand on his knee, and he folded just enough for her to slip past. The second caught her braid and ripped out half the pins, but she ducked, left hair and veil and dignity behind, and sprinted barefoot into the cloister. "Stop her!" Drake bellowed. "Alive!" She didn't stop. Stone blurred under her feet, freezing and wet. Bells began clanging somewhere in the fortress, not full alarm, but pursuit code. She flew down a servant's stair, shoulder-checking through a laundry passage that smelled of lye and wool, then out into the courtyard where snow needled her bare arms. The border fortress rose in black teeth around her. Beyond the inner gate, a road sloped east through pines toward the storm-born capital proper, the War King's territory, the place every wildfire tale painted in blood and thunder. Behind her, Drake's men shouted her name like a command. Ahead, storm-born banners snapped in the wind. If she ran back to Wildfire Lands, he would catch her before dawn. If she stayed, he would force her signature and call it law. If she crossed into Kale's domain, the male who hated her line might kill her himself. But he would do it openly. She chose the danger she could see. She vaulted a supply cart, ducked under the half-lifted inner gate while stable hands screamed, and hit the road at a dead sprint, collar chafing, lungs burning like tinder. Snow swallowed her footprints almost as quickly as she made them. For the first time in years, no one held the back of her neck. By the time the sky bruised toward morning, Evangeline could no longer feel her toes. She had run until the bells faded, then stumbled through pine forest and over frozen creek beds, guided only by the distant glow of watchfires on high walls. Once she heard wolves pacing parallel in the trees, their breaths ghosting white between trunks, but they did not close in. Stormborn patrol. Herding, not hunting. Her wounded palm had crusted dark. Each swing of her arm reopened it. The silver cuffs were still on, linked by 6 inches of chain that knocked against her knees when she fell, which she did often now, hard and graceless, catching herself on elbows and curses. At last the trees thinned. The storm-born lower barracks sprawled below a ridge, long stone halls roofed in slate, practice yards scarred with old spar marks, smoke lifting from chimneys into dawn. She had expected a fortress of monsters. Instead, she saw soldiers hauling water, sharpening spears, laughing through steam as if war and politics and binding catastrophes were someone else's weather. When she slid down the ridge and landed badly in the churned mud outside the main training yard, 3 sentries wheeled, blades half drawn. "Hold!" one shouted. "Identify!" She pushed up on shaking arms. "Evangeline Wildfire." The name tasted like risk. "I request audience with your alpha." Their eyes went to the silver on her wrists, the iron at her throat, the dried blood on her dress. One of them swore under his breath. Another reached for her collar as if checking ownership marks. She bared her teeth. "Touch me and lose the hand." A few nearby trainees turned at the commotion. Whispers spread fast. "Wildfire tribute." "Wrong bond bride." "Gods, look at her." The sentry captain, broad-shouldered and gray-eyed, kept his blade lowered but did not sheath it. "You're not in any state to make demands." "I'm in exactly that state." Her vision tunneled at the edges. She locked her knees. "Get your king." A shadow moved at the far side of the yard. A man stepped out from a rank of sparring wolves, wiping his hands on a strip of linen. Plain black leathers, no crown, scar over one brow, the same iron gaze from the treaty hall, harder in daylight. Conversation died like a candle pinched out. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Kale Stormborn stopped 10 paces from her and took in the whole of her. Mud, blood, chain, defiance, with a face carved from winter stone. "So," he said, voice low enough that only the nearest circle heard. The wildfire girl runs to my doorstep. Evangeline lifted her chin, though her legs shook. Not to you, she said, from him. For one taut heartbeat, his nostrils flared, as if scenting truth, lie, fear, all of it. Then he looked at her wrists and the collar, and something dangerous shifted behind his eyes. Drop your weapons, he told his soldiers without looking away from her. No one argued. Cale took one step closer, close enough that she could see the pulse in his throat, the old bite scars at his jaw, the fury he wore like armor. Welcome to Stormborn territory, he said. It did not sound like welcome at all. Evangeline swayed where she stood, snow and mud clinging to the hem of her ruined dress, and forced herself not to look away first. Cale's gaze dropped once more to the collar at her throat, then to the silver cuffs, then back to her face. Captain Var, he said. The gray-eyed sentry from before straightened. My lord. Get a smith, quietly. Kyle's voice hardened. And clear this yard. Murmurs erupted anyway. Wildfire, wrong bond, curse-marked. Evangeline heard every word like thrown gravel. A lanky young wolf with a split lip laughed under his breath and called. Maybe she ran because her regent lost his leash. Cale didn't turn. I said clear it. Most obeyed. A few did not move fast enough for his liking. Evangeline lifted her bound hands. I didn't come here to be hidden. You came here half frozen and chained. His tone was ice scraped over stone. You'll live long enough to argue after the metal comes off. I will argue now. She took a step and almost stumbled. Drake Stormborn has treaty papers he means to force in my blood. He's moving before Dawn Councils can meet. If you lock me in a room, he wins. Something flickered in his expression at Drake's name. Recognition. Then fury banked hard. You expect me to believe your regent forged this entire farce? I expect nothing from you. Her jaw tightened. I'm telling you what is true. Before Cale could answer, the split-lipped trainee who had mocked her snatched a blunted practice saber from a rack and tossed it point first into the mud near her feet. Then prove it, Wildfire, he sneered. Fight for your lies. Captain Var barked, Stand down, Pell. But Evangeline had already bent and grabbed the hilt. Cale's head snapped toward her. Don't! She raised the blade anyway, chain clinking between her wrists. You want proof I wasn't sent to kneel? Here. Pell grinned and charged before anyone gave leave. The first clash jarred her teeth. The second nearly ripped the saber from her numbed fingers. Her wrists were too close together to turn the blade cleanly, and the chain dragged every movement half a beat behind. Pell was young, sloppy, eager to impress. Eager wolves were dangerous. He feinted high and kicked low. She twisted, lost footing in churned mud, and hissed as the silver bit her skin. The iron collar pressed against her windpipe when she ducked. Breath went thin and ragged. Enough, Cale snapped. Neither of them listened. Pell drove in again, overcommitted, and Evangeline saw the opening on instinct. Old training, old muscle memory, wildfire forms her mother had drilled into her bones. She pivoted and brought her saber down toward his wrist. He yanked back too late. Their blades screeched. His edge skated off hers and sliced straight across her already torn palm. Pain flashed white. Blood welled instantly, bright and hot, spilling over her fingers, dripping into mud and cold air. Everything stopped. The scent hit the yard like struck flint. Cale, halfway through stepping in, froze mid-stride. His pupils blew wide, swallowing winter gray until only a ring of molten gold remained. His chest locked. Then came one sharp, involuntary inhale, as if the world had narrowed to the pulse in her throat and the blood on her hand. Evangeline felt it in the same heartbeat, a violent heat lancing down her spine, a crackle under her skin like lightning searching for ground. Her wolf, quiet for months under grief and collar and command, surged up whining, frantic, awake. Something invisible hooked behind her ribs and yanked toward him so hard her knees buckled. The saber fell from her hand. She caught herself on one palm and almost screamed when the bond pull tightened, fierce, undeniable, wrong and right at once. Desire slammed into terror, terror twisted into certainty she did not want. No, not him. Kyle made a strangled sound low in his throat. No. The word was raw, furious denial. He took one step back as if distance could cut the thread. Then he inhaled again, shaking this time, and the next word cracked out of him like a wound. Mine. Silence detonated around them. Pell went pale and dropped to one knee without being told. Captain Var looked between them with the expression of a man realizing a battlefield had just shifted under his boots. Evangeline stared up at Kale, blood running down her wrist, breath sawing. Their eye contact locked and held. No hall, no soldiers, no snow, only that impossible line between them, humming and hot and terrifyingly alive. She hated that her body leaned toward him. She hated more that his did the same. Kale tore his gaze away first, like ripping flesh from hooks. "Everybody out," he said, voice gone deadly flat. "Now." The yard emptied in seconds. When only Captain Var remained, Kale didn't look at him. "Fetch the smith, then post stormborn guards at Barracks 3, East Corridor. No wildfire retainers. No one enters without my word." Var thumped fist to chest and left at a run. Kale faced her again. The gold had faded from his eyes, but not the storm behind them. "Can you stand?" Evangeline wiped blood on her dress and pushed upright, refusing his hand. "Apparently." His jaw flexed. For a second she thought he would command, grab, bite, something primal and irreversible. Instead, he stripped off a leather wrist wrap and tossed it to her. "Wrap your palm." "That sounds almost kind." "Don't mistake control for kindness." He turned and started toward the barracks. After 3 steps, he stopped, not looking back. "If Drake sent hunters," he said, "they die at my border." She tied the leather around her hand with clumsy fingers and followed him through the snow. Barracks 3 was warmer than she expected and somehow worse for it. Too many sounds, too many scents, too much life moving around her while her own skin still buzzed from the bond like a struck wire. They gave her a narrow officer's room at the end of an east corridor. 1 bed, 1 washstand, 1 shuttered window. No bars, but 2 guards outside the door at all times, both stormborn and visibly uneasy about it. A smith came at midday, muttered an apology to no one in particular, and snapped the silver cuffs with a wedge and hammer. The release made her wrists throb. The iron collar stayed. "It's keyed," the smith said, not meeting her eyes. "Locks warded. Needs alpha override or regent seal." Drake had both once. Now only one remained. By evening, rumors had outrun the snow. Voices leaked under her door. Wrong twin, cursed mate, war price bride, wildfire trap. She paced until her legs gave out, then sat on the floor with her back to the bed and tried not to feel the thread under her ribs pulling towards somewhere else in the fortress. At some point, she slept. In the dream, she was back in Drake's chamber, kneeling on splintered boards while he fastened the collar and said, "You negotiate nothing. You are terms." Then the boards turned to ice, and the treaty hall fire went black, and every face in the tears wore her mother's eyes, disappointed and dead. She woke, clawing at her throat. No key, no air, no, no, no. She staggered into the corridor before she knew she'd opened the door, hands shaking so badly she couldn't get grip on the metal band. Nails scraped skin raw. Panic narrowed everything to iron and breath and the memory of Drake's hand at her neck. "Evangeline." Kale's voice, low, close. She spun, feral, and bared her teeth. He stood barefoot in plain black soldier's leathers, hair unbound, a whetstone in one hand and a short blade in the other as if she'd dragged him from watch duty. He took in the blood at her throat, the ragged breathing, the way she pressed herself against stone. He did not step into her space. "May I?" he asked, and nodded at the collar. She laughed once, sharp and broken. "What does it matter? It won't come off." "May I?" After a long second, she gave one stiff nod. Kyle set blade and stone on the floor and knelt in front of her, slow enough not to startle. Not command, not conquer. Kneel. The sight hit her harder than she wanted. He cupped the iron band with both palms. Heat seeped into the metal gradually, controlled. His wolf fire bled through skin until the collar stopped feeling like winter teeth. Then he slid 2 fingers to the lock and worked something delicate and precise she couldn't see. "It's warded to bite if forced," he murmured. "Hold still." She did. Barely. A soft click. Then another. The collar loosened. Kale lifted it away from her throat like it was explosive, set it down, and immediately reached for a clean strip of linen from his belt. He wrapped her wrists first, where the silver had torn her, then the base of her thumb where she'd clawed herself bloody in sleep. His hands were large, scarred, unexpectedly careful. "You could have ordered guards to hold me down," she said hoarsely. "I could have." He tied off the bandage and sat back on his heels. "You were already fighting ghosts." She touched the bare skin at her neck as if she might wake again inside the iron. "Why are you doing this?" A muscle moved in his jaw. "Because the bond would make your fear mine whether I wanted it or not." "That's not an answer." "It's the one I have at this hour." She watched him, trying to match this man with the one from Border Stories, from Smoking Villages and Battlefield Whispers. "You hate my bloodline." "Yes." "But you removed Drake's collar." "Yes." The corridor was quiet except for distant snoring and wind against shutters. At last Kyle rose and picked up his blade and whetstone. "Sleep?" She almost laughed again. "In case you missed it, I'm not very good at that." He moved to the wall opposite her door and slid down to sit, one knee up, blade across it, began to sharpen with slow, steady strokes. Shk, 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 like a metronome for breathing. "I'll be here," he said without looking at her. "No one takes you tonight." Something in her chest, wound tight for too many years, loosened one thread. Evangeline backed into her room and closed the door, not latching it. The shk of steel on stone followed her into sleep. By the next evening, storm-born politics caught up with them. The council feast was held in a long timber hall above the main keep, all antler chandeliers and smoke-black beams, with elders and generals seated by rank along 2 brutal tables. Meat sweated on platters, spiced ale steamed in heavy cups. Every conversation dipped when Evangeline entered. She wore borrowed storm-born wool and no collar. The absence felt like both freedom and exposure. Kale had insisted she attend. "If you hide," he told her before they entered, "they write your story without you." So she walked in beside him, while he looked every inch a common war captain in unadorned black. No crown, no circlet, no royal braid, just scars and controlled violence. At the far dais sat 3 elder counselors and 2 high generals. One of the elders, a hawk-nosed woman draped in fox fur, didn't bother waiting for toasts. "So this is the war price," she said, loud enough to carry. "Pretty enough, shackled less prettily yesterday." A few chuckles answered her. Evangeline kept her spine straight. "My name is Evangeline Wildfire." "Names are for daughters and allies," the elder replied. "You are neither yet." General Hroth, thick-necked, silver in his beard, leaned forward, eyes like nails. "Test her now, publicly. Strip her for blades and ink. Make her swear naked before the hearth if she's not carrying wildfire tricks." Heat flushed Evangeline's face, rage following close. Across from her, several younger officers looked away, ashamed. Others looked interested. Kale went very still beside her. The fox-fur elder lifted a hand. Reasonable. If she is clean, no insult done. No insult? Evangeline said, voice sharp. You call me tribute, then ask for humiliation as proof of obedience. Hroth snorted and rose half from his bench. Obedience is exactly what... He reached for her wrist. Kyle stepped between them so fast the bench rocked. Don't touch her, he said. Hroth sneered at the unranked leathers. Stand aside, soldier. This is elder business. Kale's head tilted a fraction, as if hearing something distant. Then he spoke one word into the room with alpha force that slammed like thunder. Kneel. Power ripped outward, cups rattled, fire guttered. Wolves all through the hall dropped. Some to one knee, some both. Involuntary. Shocked. Even the elder on the dais gasped and clutched the table. Only Hroth fought it. Face purple with effort, one hand still reaching past Kale. Bad choice. Kale caught his wrist, twisted and drove it down onto the table edge. Bone cracked loud as split kindling. Hroth roared and collapsed to his knees at last, cradling his ruined arm. Kale released him and turned toward the dais. When he spoke again, the room listened like prey. You will address her as Lady Evangeline until she chooses another title. His eyes swept the elders. You will not call her war price. You will not demand degradation rights. You will not lay hands on her without consent. The fox-fur elder whispered, shaken. My king. So the room learned what his plain leathers had hidden. Kyle continued, voice cold enough to frost breath. Insulting her is now treason against the crown. No one laughed this time. Evangeline stood very still behind him, pulse hammering. She had expected possession, maybe, from a male dragged by bond and duty. Not this. Not a public line drawn in blood law and consequence. Hroth spat at the floor, clutching his wrist. Over a wildfire female? Kale didn't even look at him. Over my mate. Over a guest under Stormborn protection. Over the law you just broke. He stepped aside then, just enough to give Evangeline space beside him instead of behind him. A small gesture. A deliberate one. The elder counselor swallowed and nodded once, stiffly. Then, let the record show formal protection granted. Let it show more than that, Evangeline said before fear could stop her. Every face turned to her. She met the elder's stare. Let it show I will answer accusations in council, not in humiliation pits. I came with warning of forged treaties and blood coercion. If you want truth, ask questions. If you want a scapegoat, carve one from your own table. Silence held. Then, unexpectedly, one young officer thumped fist to chest in respect. Another followed. Soon a rough scatter of acknowledgments moved down the lower benches. Not acceptance, not yet, but not contempt, either. Kyle's shoulder brushed hers, brief as a breath. Sit, he said quietly. This time, when she took the seat offered at his right hand, she didn't feel like a captive being displayed. She felt dangerously like she might survive this long enough to choose what came next. The first course arrived untouched. Boar, charred roots, oat bread slicked with fat, food that should have made the hall loud again. Instead, conversation came in careful fragments, every sentence angled away from the two of them at the center table. Evangeline kept her hands folded so no one saw them shake. Kel ate like a soldier on campaign. Quick, efficient, eyes never still. Twice she caught him scanning the door behind the serving line. Once she noticed Captain Var move to intercept a kitchen boy before he reached their table, trade trays, then hand the original cup to a hound for tasting. By the time the second course was cleared, a horn sounded from the outer gate. One long blast, two short. Messenger. A mud-spattered rider was brought straight in, still breathing hard, cloak torn at one shoulder. He knelt at the threshold and held up a wax tube marked with the Stormborn border seal. For the crown, he rasped. Intercepted at East Pass, wildfire outriders dead, courier attempted to burn the packet. Kale took the tube himself. Who stopped him? Patrol 12. He carried Regency sigils and... The rider glanced at Evangeline, then away. And a list of names. Kyle's mouth flattened. War Room. Now. The War Room sat beneath the keep. All slate tables and pinned maps, the air smelling of tallow and wet wool. Present. Kale, Evangeline, Captain Var, the Foxfur elder from supper, and Stormborn's archivist, a severe woman with ink on her fingers and no patience for drama. Kale broke the wax and unrolled 3 parchments. Evangeline recognized Drake's script immediately. Elegant, cruelly neat. The first document bore both pack seals and her name in full at the bottom. Evangeline Wildfire, acting blood heir and consenting signatory. It transferred Wildfire grazing valleys and 2 iron passes into temporary Stormborn trusteeship under Regent Drake Stormborn for stabilization. The second was worse. It cited coercive mate binding by Alpha Kale Stormborn and invoked emergency execution rights to preserve treaty legitimacy. The third was a circular letter to neutral clans, already copied for dispatch. Testimony that Evangeline had manipulated right sequence to displace lawful groom, provoke twin conflict, and compromise succession. Her stomach turned to ice. He used my blood, she said. The archivist looked up. How can you tell? Evangeline pointed to the signature line. The crimson thumbprint looked old brown now, but the scent hit her anyway when she leaned close. Faint iron, clove oil, and the sharp medicinal resin Drake always rubbed into his gloves to hide wine stains. That is mine. Taken, not given. Probably from treaty night, or from the room when he brought papers. Var swore. Kale's knuckles whitened on the table edge. Read the list. Var unfolded the separate strip. As his eyes moved, his expression darkened. Names of Stormborn officers assigned to Capital Watch, marked with route times. Someone gave your guard rotations to Wildfire hands. Not Wildfire hands, Evangeline said quietly. Drake's hands. He calls himself Wildfire when it profits him. The Foxfur elder bristled. Convenient distinction. Evangeline snapped her gaze to her. Do you think I forged my own consent to execute the male I'm magically bound to? Use your head. A beat. Then the elder looked away first. Kale slid the execution order toward the fire lamp but did not burn it. He wants me dead under legal color. Wants her discredited. Wants both packs screaming for an elder to stabilize what he shattered. Emergency rule, the archivist said, understanding dawning. Over both territories. Exactly. Var set down the list. And he's moving fast. These copies were headed to the clans tonight. Kale looked to Evangeline. What else? She hated that she knew. Hated that she could hear Drake's voice as if he stood behind her shoulder. He'll split your house before he comes at your throat, she said. He'll strike where blame can stick to me. He'll make everything look like proof that I came here to break you. The room went still. Kale folded the parchments once, precise. Then we stop him before dawn. Stopping Drake turned out to mean surviving him first. By midnight, rumors had multiplied like rot in grain. A stablemaster swore he'd seen Evangeline in the lower archives stealing seals. A maid claimed she'd heard her confess she meant to choose between twins for power. 2 sentries fought in the yard over whether Kale had been bewitched or merely made it out of his mind. Someone scratched war price into her door in charcoal before dawn. Someone else crossed it out and wrote Crown Mate beneath. Neither word felt safe. Kale posted Stormborn guards at every approach to Barracks 3, doubled food tasting, and moved his gentler twin, his brother, the one meant to marry her at treaty, to inner quarters with 6 hand-picked wolves. He also ordered every messenger hawk grounded until seals could be verified. By breakfast, 3 forged notices had still appeared in the Capitol Square, all bearing copies of her blood thumbprint. Pressure tightened from every side. Elders demanded she be confined until tribunal. Generals demanded she complete a public bond right to stabilize command sent. Half the barracks watched her like a fuse. The other half watched Kale for signs he would cut her loose. She tried not to feel the thread between them growing hotter with each argument. At midday, Kale hauled her into the strategy court behind the armory and handed her a training spear. Again. She glared. You think drills solve forgery? I think panic makes you predictable. He took his stance. Move. They circled on packed snow. The bond thrummed every time he entered range, a pulse under skin, distracting and infuriating. She lunged, he deflected. He advanced, she pivoted. He corrected her grip with 2 fingers, and the brief contact sent heat skittering up her arm so fast she nearly dropped the shaft. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes lifted to hers. You can't freeze every time it pulls. I'm not freezing. You're lying. She attacked hard enough to make him give ground. I don't want this bond. Neither do I, he said, and the honesty landed like a slap. They broke apart breathing hard. After a long moment, he lowered his spear. Wanting and having are not the same. She wiped sweat from her temple with the back of her wrist. Then why does it feel like I'm being dragged? His expression went shuttered. Because half-formed bonds are teeth without a jaw. They bite everything. Before she could answer, Var entered at a run, snow on his shoulders. My lord. Inner quarter disturbance. Your brother's escort found a dead kitchen scullion in the service stair. No visible wounds. Silver dust on his tongue. Kyle went utterly still. Wolfsbane? He asked. Mixed with powdered silver, Healer says. Evangeline's heart slammed against her ribs. Drake, she said. Kale was already moving. Lockdown kitchens. No communal drink. No one consumes anything untested. Var hesitated, then added, There's more. A copy of the execution addendum was nailed to the barracks gate this morning, signed with her mark. Kyle looked back at Evangeline. For one brutal second she saw calculation in his face, not distrust exactly, but the cost of believing her against a storm of paper and blood. Then he said, You stay in my sight. It should have felt like custody. Instead, shamefully, it felt like relief. That night the keep quieted to a brittle hush, the kind before blizzard or battle. Kyle dismissed everyone from the map chamber except her. One lamp burned low over carved borders. Outside, wind worried the shutters. Inside, parchment and silence. He stood with both hands braced on the table, staring at the line where wildfire forest met storm-born stone. I used to know every raid pattern on this border, he said without preamble. Could tell which clan hit which farm by the cut of tracks. Thought that made me wise. Evangeline leaned against a shelf, arms folded tight. And now? Now I find out half of what I buried was ordered by a man who wore your colors in daylight and mine at night. She watched his shoulders rise, fall. My mother tried to expose him, she said, before she died. Kale turned his head a fraction. You never said that. You never asked. Her throat tightened anyway. She taught me truth sent rights when I was little. Said blood remembers what mouths refuse. Drake called it superstition. Then he burned her journals. Kale looked back at the map. My mother died in a border fire when I was 14. Wildfire torches, everyone said. I spent 10 years hating a flag. Evangeline crossed to the table before she could rethink it. Do you know who led that raid? No. His jaw flexed. Records vanished. Drake was quartermaster that winter. The words settled between them like a dropped blade. Kale's eyes lifted slowly to hers. For once there was no command in them, No Iron King, just a man piecing grief into a new shape that hurt differently. He took both our mothers, he said. Yes. Wind thudded at the shutters. Somewhere distant, a watch bell marked the hour. The bond hummed, quieter now, less claw than thread. Kale's hand moved on the table, not quite reaching, stopping with inches between their knuckles. I don't know how to do this gently, he said, voice rough. Any of it. Rule. Bond. You. She gave a short, humorless breath. Good. I don't know how to be gentle right now. His mouth almost curved. That might save us. Her gaze dropped to his throat, pulse, scar, skin. She had dreamed of tearing and kissing in equal measure. She hated the hunger. She hated that it no longer felt entirely unwanted. I still don't trust you, she whispered. Don't, he said. Trust actions, not vows. She nodded once. When he reached this time, he didn't grab. He turned her bandaged palm upward and inspected where the cut had reopened. Then he unwrapped the linen and, with maddening care, cleaned it in warm water from the kettle by the brazier. You keep bleeding for politics, he muttered. You keep breaking generals for me. Fair trade. She laughed. Small, startled, real. It broke something open in the room. Kale looked up at the sound, and suddenly they were too close, breath mingling, his thumb resting just below her wrist where her pulse fluttered. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Hers dropped to his. No one moved. A knock exploded against the chamber door. My lord! Var's voice sharp with urgency. Council summons. Immediate. Kale's eyes closed once, briefly, like a man denying himself water. He stepped back first. Duty, he said. Evangeline rewrapped her hand with fingers that didn't feel steady. Lead, then. The emergency council convened in the upper tribunal hall, candles blazing despite the hour. Elders, generals, clan voices, healers. Too many bodies. Too much fear. At the center stood Kale's twin brother, pale but composed, one hand braced on the back of a chair. He looked at Evangeline with weary kindness, the same face as Kale's rearranged by gentleness. Lady Evangeline, he said softly, I wish we had met under better omens. Before she could answer, the fox-fur elder struck her staff. Given escalating unrest, she announced, we proceed tonight with provisional oath-right. Crown, witness twin, and bound mate share the ceremonial chalice to affirm non-aggression until formal tribunal. Evangeline's skin prickled. Now? At midnight? Now, said General Hroth, arms splinted, voice sour. Before your regent's papers fracture the barracks by dawn. Servants brought the moon chalice on a silver tray, steam curling from spiced wine. Evangeline caught a bitter metal scent under the cloves and honey. Familiar. Wrong. Her heart kicked. Wait, she said. No one listened. The elder began the invocation. Kale took the cup first as required, lifted it toward his mouth. Evangeline lunged and slapped it from his hand. Wine exploded across stone. For one stunned beat, the room froze. Then shouting crashed from every side. Traitor! She attacked the right. Seize her! Kale moved in front of her on instinct, snarling. Stand down! The chalice spun to a stop near the dais steps, liquid smoking where it pooled against old silver inlaid in the floor. Healers swore and dropped to their knees. Wolfsbane, one breathed. Silver dusted. Chaos detonated. At that exact moment, glass shattered high in the western window. A bolt hissed through candlelight and buried itself in Kale's brother's chest. He jerked once, eyes wide, then collapsed. Screams ripped the hall. Kale's roar shook the rafters as he caught his twin before he hit stone. Blood spread black across the man's tunic, fast and terrible. Brother, stay with me. Var and 3 guards sprinted for the window. Another volley of bolts clattered off pillars. Someone blew out half the candles. Shadows leapt. Wolves shifted at the edges of the crowd, fur and panic and teeth. Evangeline dropped beside Kale, hands already pressing the wound. The shaft was barbed, smeared with gray paste that stank of silver and nightshade. Her fingers came away dark. The dying twin's gaze found her, unfocused, pleading. Not her, he tried to say, blood bubbling at his lips. Hroth shouted over the uproar. She poisoned the cup and signaled the archer. Look at her hands. Half the hall turned toward Evangeline, blood-streaked, kneeling over a fallen prince, standing in spilled poison. Perfect. Drake perfect. Guards surged forward. Kale looked up from his brother's body, eyes gone feral gold, grief and murder and command colliding in one face. Touch her, he said to the room, voice like a drawn blade, and I will tear this hall down stone by stone. No one moved. His brother convulsed once beneath Evangeline's palms, then went still. For a breathless instant, no one in the tribunal hall seemed to remember how to move. Kyle knelt in the spreading blood, his twin's body cradled against him, head bowed as if refusal alone could drag life back into still lungs. Evangeline's hands were slick red to the wrists. The poisoned chalice smoked where it had spilled across the silver inlay. Wolves snarled at the edges of the crowd, half-shifted, eyes wild in the stuttering candlelight. Then the shouting returned. She killed him. Bind the wildfire! Seal the doors! General Hroth, pale with pain and fury, pointed with his good hand. There, she struck the cup and gave the signal. Evangeline got to her feet in one smooth motion, every sense sharpened to a knife point. A second bolt hissed from the dark window and struck the pillar behind her shoulder. Not aimed at Kyle. Aimed at the witness who had smelled poison first. She dropped low as stone chips sprayed. Archers west wall! Captain Var roared. Stormborn guards charged, two shifting mid-run, claws scraping slate as they tore through the side doors toward the outer galleries. At the far end of the hall, one of Drake's wildfire retainers, she recognized the scar down his jaw, drew steel, and lunged for her through the confusion. For the Regent! Kale moved before thought. He laid his brother down with brutal care and intercepted the attacker with a collision that broke both men through a bench. Wood cracked. The retainer slashed. Kale caught the blade bare-handed, blood running down his palm, and drove his forehead into the man's face hard enough to drop him. Var! Kale barked without looking up. Anyone shouting for Regent command goes in irons. The Foxfur elder staggered backward from the dais, staff trembling. This is civil fracture. By moon law, the accused mate is confined until inquiry. Then inquire with your eyes, Evangeline snapped, holding up her bloodied hands. The poison was in your chalice. The bolt came from your wall. If I wanted him dead, I would have let Kale drink first. That bought her one shocked heartbeat of silence. Then the main doors boomed open. Regent Drake Stormborn strode in wearing morning black, cloak snow-dusted, expression carved into perfect outrage. A ring of wildfire guards flanked him, all too clean, all armed for war inside a council hall. He took in the body on the floor, the bolt, the poisoned scorch, and put one hand to his heart like a grieving statesman. By the old gods, he said hoarsely, I arrived too late. Evangeline went cold. Of course he had come, not to hide, to direct the ruin. Drake's gaze found her and sharpened theatrically. Niece, what have you done? I stopped your poison from reaching Kale, she said. He gave a pained smile to the elders. Do you hear her? Delusion already. She envied the intended groom, failed to secure the war twin, and now she drenches this hall in blood to force succession. Kale rose, blood on his knuckles and his brother's across his chest, and every wolf in the room felt the threat in him. Choose your next word carefully, Drake. Drake bowed his head a fraction. I choose law. I carry signed addendums from Wildfire, authorizing immediate detention of Lady Evangeline for bond coercion, attempted regicide, and treason against both packs. He raised a parchment tube. Evangeline saw her own forged blood print glistening dark on the seal. Peril snapped shut around her like iron jaws. If they confined her now, he would own the narrative by dawn. Kale could kill him here, maybe, but then Drake would die a martyr and every forged order would still move on riders already gone. Kale's eyes met hers across the room, grief-ripped and incandescent. He understood the same thing. Take her to the inner vault, he said to Var, voice like thunder over a grave. No one touches her. No one questions her. By my command. It sounded like protection. It also sounded like prison. The inner vault smelled of cold stone and lamp smoke, its walls engraved with old war oaths that outlived kingdoms. Var dismissed the guards at Kale's order and stood watch outside himself, leaving them alone in a chamber barely wide enough for a map table and 2 chairs. Kale paced once, twice, then slammed both palms onto the table so hard inkpots jumped. He killed my brother, he said, each word scraped raw. He poisoned the right and pinned it on you in one stroke. Evangeline leaned against the wall, exhausted to the marrow but violently awake. He's been planning this since treaty night. Maybe before. Kale dragged a hand over his face, leaving blood streaks like war paint. I can get you out. There's a smuggler's pass beneath the eastern granary. Var can move you to the mountain clans before dawn. You vanish. He loses his scapegoat. I crush him in open field. She stared at him. He mistook her silence for hesitation and stepped closer, voice low and urgent. If you stay, he drags you before a tribunal he already bought. Every elder with a frightened air will vote to sacrifice the outsider to calm their barracks. I can't fight a legal execution without splitting Stormborn in half tonight. And if I run? She asked. Then you live. Do I? Her laugh came out like broken glass. He will still wave my blood signature. He will still claim I seduced one twin and murdered the other. He will still ride into Wildfire as protector while my people kneel because their heir fled. Kyle's jaw flexed. I'm trying to keep you breathing. I know. She pushed away from the wall and crossed to him, close enough that the bond thrummed hot under their skin. But I am done surviving on other men's decisions. He went still. Drake is my bloodkin, she said. Under oldest Wildfire law, I can accuse him before both packs in a bloodkin tribunal. Not council inquiry, not elder vote. Stone trial. Kale frowned, searching memory. That right hasn't been used in generations. Because no one dares invoke it unless they can prove truth by scent magic. She held up her scarred palm. My mother taught me. He exhaled sharply. Evangeline, if it fails. He executes us by paperwork anyway. She took his bloodied hand from the table and pressed it to her chest so he could feel her heart hammering. I am afraid. I am furious. I am grieving a male I barely knew and still failed to save. But I am not running. Their gazes locked. Kale's wolf flickered through his eyes, bright gold and storm-torn. If you walk into that hall, I may not be able to shield you from every blade. I don't want a shield, she said. I want witnesses. A long, brutal pause. Then he nodded once, like accepting terms of battle. At first bell, public tribunal. Both packs summoned. No closed doors. He lifted her hand and turned it, studying the healing cut. What do you need? He asked. A treaty stone. Every document Drake carries. And for you, she said, voice roughening, to let me finish before you tear his throat out. That almost became a smile, broken and dangerous. No promises on the last part. Kale. He closed his fingers around hers, hard enough to ground. I'll give you your fight. Outside, the bells began to toll for dawn. By sunrise, the great tribunal court was packed to the rafters. Stormborn generals in iron-trimmed leather, Wildfire clan heads in ash-red cloaks. Healers, scribes, sentries, kitchen hands, stable girls, all crammed shoulder to shoulder because rumor had said execution and wolves came for blood. At the center stood the treaty stone, a slab of volcanic glass veined with pale quartz, old as either crown. Drake waited beside it in regent black, composed, one hand wrapped in silk where she had cut him during her escape. His loyalists ringed the lower steps. Above, archers watched from galleries with arrows nocked. Kale sat the Alpha throne, no crown, no ornaments, only command. Var stood at his right, the archivist at his left with an armful of sealed documents and a face like judgment. Evangeline walked down the center aisle alone. No chains, no veil, no collar. The crowd's noise thinned into a rustle and died. Drake gave her the same smile he'd worn while fastening iron at her throat. Niece, you should have taken exile when offered. She stopped at the stone. You should have stopped at greed before you reached murder. The Foxfur elder struck her staff. Proceed. Drake lifted the first parchment high so all could see. Signed in her blood, witnessed by my household. She consents to territorial transfer and confirms coercion by Alpha Kale. She attacked sacred right and caused the death of lawful crown twin. By statute. By wildfire root law. Evangeline cut in, her voice carrying clearer than she felt. I invoke blood-kin accusation before both packs. A ripple of shock broke across the tiers. The elder's mouth fell open. You can't invoke without regent assent. I am blood heir of Wildfire. He is the accused blood-kin. Assent is not required. Evangeline drew Kale's belt knife. He had handed it to her before entering, and sliced her palm in one clean line. Fresh blood welled, bright and hot. She slammed her hand onto the treaty stone. The quartz veins flared ember red. By mother's teaching and mountain fire, she said, each word old language precise. Let blood remember truth and rot reveal itself. The air changed. Not wind, not magic as spectacle. Something subtler and older. Scent rising from stone like heat off summer earth, pulling every wolf's senses sharp. Drake's composure cracked for the first time. Evangeline nodded to the archivist. Documents. One by one, the archivist stepped forward and laid the territorial transfer on the stone. Clean parchment, red thumbprint, formal script. Evangeline touched the signature. Nothing. Accused, she said, eyes on Drake, place your hand beside mine and affirm this document. He hesitated. The crowd murmured. Kale leaned forward on the throne. Do it. Drake set his palm down, silk wrap brushing the ink. Black smoke curled instantly from the signature line, thin at first, then thick as tar. The parchment hissed. Gasps erupted as the bloodprint darkened and blistered like flesh over flame. Forgery, the archivist whispered, stunned. Contamination, Drake snapped. Trick resin. Next, Evangeline said. Execution order to kill Kale. Drake touched it. Smoke poured black. Circular accusing her of jealousy and planned twin switch. Drake touched it. Smoke poured black. One after another, every paper he had carried as law blistered under his hand and stank of falsehood so sharply that wolves in the front rows snarled and recoiled. Drake's eyes went flat with hate. He lunged. A silver dagger flashed from his sleeve, aimed straight for Evangeline's throat. She was already moving. Her shift hit halfway, bones cracking, jaw extending, claws punching through fingertips. Enough wolf for power, enough woman for control. She caught his dagger wrist between her teeth before the blade landed. Silver burned her gums. She bit harder anyway and wrenched. He screamed. She pivoted on her back foot and threw him bodily across the stone dais. He crashed against the base of the Alpha throne, cloak tearing. Glass vials spilled from hidden pockets and shattered across the steps, releasing the bitter reek of wolfsbane and powdered silver. Proof rolled everywhere. The court erupted. Poison! Regent treachery! Seize him! Drake scrambled, blood at his wrist, eyes feral. Kill her! He shrieked at his loyalists. Kill the bitch before she seals the right. 3 wildfire blades came up. Var's command cut across them. Stormborn Guard, take them! Steel rang. Hroth, jaw clenched, stepped in front of Evangeline with his splinted arm and blocked one of Drake's men long enough for a guard to disarm him. The Foxfur Elder shouted for order until her voice broke. Evangeline stalked down the steps and planted her boot on Drake's chest, pinning him as he thrashed. She tore his own silver dagger from his bleeding hand and held it under his jaw. You sold your niece, burned her home, and called it peace, she said, loud enough for every tear. Look at them and lie one more time. He bared bloodied teeth. You think they'll follow you? You are nothing without the men who own you. Chaol descended from the throne, slow as an avalanche. For one terrible second, Evangeline thought he would kill Drake where he lay. Instead, he stopped beside her and spoke formally, voice ringing with law. Accuse Drake Stormborn. You are charged with kinsale forgery, regicide by proxy, and attempted mate murder. Under Dual Pack Code, you may answer challenge by combat. He looked at Evangeline. Her decision. She lifted the dagger a fraction from Drake's throat. Stand, she said. Chaol stepped back and released the pressure of Alpha Command in the space around them. Drake rolled, coughed, then surged up with a snarl, producing a second hidden blade from his boot. He came at her wild and fast. Evangeline sidestepped, slashed his forearm, and let him overcommit. He pivoted and drove low toward her ribs. She trapped his wrist, drove her knee into his gut, and when he bent, she struck once. Clean, precise, straight through under the sternum into the heart. Drake's eyes went wide, unbelieving. He made a wet, shocked sound, then sagged against her. Evangeline held him long enough that he felt exactly who had ended him. I was never yours, she said. She withdrew the blade and let him fall. Drake Stormborn hit the tribunal stone and did not rise. The hall stood stunned in the wake of it. Of truth smoke, poison vials, dead regent, and the impossible sight of a young woman killing the man who had ruled her life. Then Captain Var dropped to one knee and struck fist to chest. Witnessed, he said. The archivist followed. Recorded. One by one, Stormborn guards knelt, then Wildfire clan voices slower, shaken, then certain. Even the Foxfur Elder bowed her head. General Hroth, breathing hard, met Evangeline's gaze and gave a stiff nod that might have been apology or surrender or both. Chaol did not kneel. He walked to her through blood and broken glass and stopped close enough to share breath. His hand lifted, hovered near her cheek without touching, asking. She leaned into it. His thumb brushed away a streak of Drake's blood. Come with me, he said quietly. Where? Moon Altar. The words landed heavy with old consequence, unfinished bonds either sealed there or shattered beyond repair. Evangeline looked once at Drake's body, once at the court still reeling, and nodded. Together, she said. The moon altar stood above the keep on a wind-scoured terrace of white stone, open to the sky. Evening had fallen hard and clear. Stars burned like ice chips. Snow gathered in the grooves of ancient runes circling the platform. No council, no witnesses but Var at the stairs, posted far enough to grant privacy and close enough to kill anyone who interrupted. Evangeline's hands shook as she stepped into the circle. Blood had dried in rust-dark lines along her arms. Chaol's leathers were still stained with his twin's death. Grief hovered between them, sharp as cold. He stopped across from her, chest rising and falling. I should say this first, Chaol said, voice rough. If you want the bond broken, I'll take the pain. I won't force a claim. The night wind cut between them. Evangeline swallowed. Do you? His laugh was short. Brutal honesty, as always. I wanted to hate you. It was easier. And now? Now I want you alive. Beside me. Arguing with me until we're ancient and unbearable. His throat worked. Now I want what I swore I wouldn't need. The thread under her ribs pulled warm and sure. She stepped closer until their boots touched. I choose this, she said. Not because magic dragged me, because you knelt in a corridor when you could have commanded. Because you stood between me and your own counsel. Because when I asked for a fight, you gave me one instead of a cage. Cale closed his eyes once, relief and ache crossing his face in equal measure. Say it again, he whispered. I choose you. He opened his eyes, wolf gold brightening, and slowly, deliberately, bared his throat to her, exposing the vulnerable line of pulse from jaw to collarbone, total surrender from a male every border story called unbreakable. Then take mine first, he said. Her breath hitched. She touched his neck with careful fingers, feeling life hammer there. Kyle, are you sure? Evangeline. His gaze locked to hers. Mine, if you want it. Yours, if you claim it. Mate, if you say yes. Yes, she breathed. He shuddered at the word, then straightened and cupped the back of her neck, waiting one final heartbeat for refusal. She tipped her head, offering the curve where neck met shoulder. Cale's mouth found her skin, hot and reverent first, then his fangs slid in. Pain flared white, sharp, shocking, bright enough to tear a cry from her throat. She gripped his shoulders hard, nails biting leather and flesh, knees threatening to buckle. Then the pain turned. Heat poured from the bite in molten waves, down her spine, through her chest, into every place fear had lived. The bond snapped taut and then open, like a locked gate kicked wide. Emotion flooded both directions at once. His grief for his brother, raw and bleeding, her years of iron and obedience cracking apart, his fierce, frightening devotion, her answering ferocity, no longer caged. Rain scent, pine smoke, blood, fire, home. Her wolf surged up and then settled, finally, with a deep, astonished rumble. Not trapped, not hunted. Paired. Cale pulled back, breath ragged, blood bright on his lips, and wonder in his eyes like he hadn't believed peace could feel like this. The mark on her neck burned hot, then steadied to a deep pulse. Mine, he whispered, forehead to hers. Evangeline's hand slid to his chest. Yours, she whispered back. Mate. She turned him with a firm push and set her palm over his heart, feeling the thunder of it beneath scar and muscle. He gave her the same trust she had given him, bearing the slope of shoulder over his heart. Your turn, he said, voice shaking. She bared her teeth and bit. His body jerked with a strangled sound, one hand slamming to the altar behind her for balance. She tasted iron and rain and storm. The bite burned her jaw with answering heat as their marks resonated, pain transforming in him the way it had in her, into fierce pleasure, into claiming, into impossible relief. He laughed once, breathless and disbelieving, even as his knees bent and his forehead dropped to hers again. Their bond sealed with a palpable click in the marrow. No more jagged yanks, no more clawing static. A steady, living current ran between them, warm as banked coals. Cale wrapped both arms around her and held on like a man who had survived drowning without noticing until now. Evangeline buried her face in his neck and let herself shake. Not from fear this time, but from release. He kissed the fresh mark at her shoulder and murmured against her skin. Mine. She kissed the mark over his heart. Yours. Together, breaths mingling in clouds under the stars, they whispered, Mate. Then, as if speaking law older than crowns, they pressed foreheads and said in unison, Chosen in blood, kept in fire, equal in pack. The moon broke through cloud and silvered the altar stones. For the first time since the treaty hall burned black, silence inside her felt like peace. 3 days later, the same tribunal court filled again, this time with ink, witnesses, and no blood on the stone. Cale stood at one side of the treaty table, Evangeline at the other, equal distance from the center seal. Their fresh marks showed above their collars without apology. Var managed the guard lines. The archivist sat with 6 scribes and a stack of cleaned, verified documents. The Foxfur elder presided with visible humility. Hroth, arm-braced and expression grim, took his assigned place among military witnesses and kept his mouth shut unless called. At the rear of the hall, 2 pyres smoked in the memory yard beyond open doors, one for Cale's twin, one for Drake. No one pretended those deaths meant the same thing. Evangeline dipped her quill and read aloud the opening clause she had written by hand. No person of either pack shall be traded as tribute, spouse, hostage, or war price under any circumstance. The words rang clear. A murmur rolled through the crowd, then steady nods. She continued, "No treaty shall be valid if signed under chain, collar, drug, coercion, or blood theft. Violations invoke immediate voiding and joint tribunal." Cale added the next line, voice carrying to the rafters. "War declaration requires dual alpha assent and border council vote. Either alpha holds veto." The Foxfur elder looked between them. "State your titles for record." Cale answered first. "Cale Stormborn, Alpha King." Evangeline held the elder's gaze. "Evangeline Wildfire Stormborn, co-alpha of the United Territories." Not queen consort, not ornament. The court heard the distinction. The archivist smiled, small and satisfied, as she wrote it down. One by one, clan voices stepped forward to sign. Stormborn, Wildfire, Mountain Neutral Houses. Hroth signed with a stiff bow toward Evangeline before retreating. "For what it's worth," he muttered, not quite meeting her eyes. "I was wrong." "You were loud about it," she replied. His mouth twitched despite himself. "A known flaw." At last Var brought the final seal, pressed wax, and set his fist to his chest. Compact witnessed and bound. Outside, bells rang, not alarm this time, but proclamation. When the hall began to empty, Cale found Evangeline at the doors, watching recruits in the lower yard run spear drills through melting snow. "Barracks first?" he asked. She leaned into his side, easy now. "Barracks first, always." Below, mixed squads trained under both Stormborn and Wildfire captains. No one wore collars. No one carried tribute chains. The first new patrol roster already paired wolves across old feud lines. They argued over footwork instead of ancestry. Cale threaded his fingers through hers. "Var says the last of Drake's loyalists confessed to courier routes. The poisoned stock is burned." "And the assassin?" "Caught at East Wall trying to run. Took coins stamped with Drake's private seal." His expression hardened, then eased when he looked at her. "No more ghosts hiding in paperwork." She squeezed his hand. "There will be other ghosts. Then we hunt them together." A young cadet in the yard looked up, saw them at the balcony, and thumped fist to chest. Others followed, an uneven wave of respect building until it became thunder against leather and iron. Evangeline met Cale's eyes, felt the steady hum of their settled bond, and smiled without flinching. "Come on, mate," she said. "You promised to teach me that disarm you used on Hroth." He arched a brow. "So you can use it on me in council?" "Absolutely." His laugh rolled out warm in the cold air. "Mine." "Yours," she returned, and tugged him toward the stairs. They went down to the yard side by side, co-alphas, marked, blood-tested, and chosen, into a realm they would have to keep building with teeth and patience and law. For the first time, the future did not smell like smoke. It smelled like rain on stone, steel in honest hands, and fire held, not as weapon, but as hearth.